7 a.m. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Welcome in. Glad you're with us. Great show for you today. A lot of college basketball from over the weekend. We'll get to that. The latest on the NCAA tournament. The SEC tournament schedule is set. And it's just going to be another loaded day of college basketball. More conference championships going to be decided. But Alabama gets a massive win against Auburn over the weekend at Auburn. One of the most entertaining basketball games I've seen this season. I don't think a lot of people would even push back on that, as you had a competitive game, go to overtime, back and forth, emotional moments, swings both ways, momentum going both ways at different points in time in this game. And the conversations about Alabama stumbling down the stretch seem to have now gone away. Some more concerns for Auburn for a lot of people. Where are you on Alabama, Greg, now after they were able to go to the Plains and pull off that big win, as far as what they may be capable of, may not have been capable of before the weekend?
Well, I mean, I obviously feel pretty good about what happened this weekend. I mean, I thought it was really some clutch moments, some real clutch free throws down the stretch. Phylon hit a couple clutch free throws. Sears hit a couple clutch free throws. What I feel best about, though, is that Grant Nelson's come out of his month-long slumber. I mean, I don't feel like he's really been playing anywhere near his capability for quite a while now. I don't know exactly how long. I mean, I have to look back and look at the numbers, but he hasn't been that guy. But whatever was said, whatever was done, was exactly what was needed. Him and the presence of Omori there on the low post as an offensive threat was also terrific. So I think there's a lot to feel great about with what we saw this weekend from the Tide.
I don't think there's any doubt about a couple of new faces maybe developing, I don't want to say new roles, but just showing that they can do different things to help this Alabama team win. An Auburn team that seemed frustrated at times. Emotions obviously got the best of them in certain instances. I think when you're the number one team in the country, you shouldn't have to beg and ask for certain things that it felt like some of the players wanted and maybe some of the coaching staff wanted during that game. You just go win the game. You could say that some of it was agitated, brought on. Some of it is something that a guy like Chad Baker-Mazar's got to learn not to do anymore. But you go out there and just prove you're the better basketball team. At the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. And it felt like portions of that game didn't really go that way. Janai Broome was great, 34 points, 15 of 28 from the floor, 2 of 4 from three. One of his threes, massive late to be able to keep Auburn in that game. And he goes 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 5 blocks in the game. He was just he was what Auburn needs him to be to go win a national championship. The scary thing is he was that, yet couldn't find a way to get a win against Alabama at home.
Yeah, but I mean, he was amazing. Chad Baker-Mazar is a punk, man. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the guy is. I mean, the guy could have been thrown out 3 times. Finally, what is he thinking? I guess is what I don't understand. What does he gain? I mean, when he went and hit Youngblood in the face, which was clearly obvious. He was 4 feet from the ball. I mean, it was really bloodied Youngblood's left eye, swelled up his left eye. Like, how did that not result in a flagrant? The guy just does this every single game. He's good for at least a flagrant, I feel like, almost all the time. So as good as he is and as frustrating as he is for the opposition, there's a fine line between being frustrating to play against and a guy that is detrimental to your team. And I think he flirts with it pretty regularly.
So has your opinion on Auburn or Alabama changed, good, bad, heading into the postseason? We now have the SEC tournament set, and both teams going to wait until Friday to play. So some big breaks that'll make a big difference. Richard Hendricks will join us at 9 o'clock this morning to discuss Alabama and Auburn on the hardwood, the rest of the SEC tournament, how it's going to shape up, how it looks, the rest of the SEC weekend. Richard Hendricks joins us thanks to Pizza Pulls on Fanatics Live every Monday at 9. Paul Feinbaum going to be with us at 7:15. He joins us thanks to Craneworks every Monday. We'll ask him about this SEC tournament also. So a lot to get to from a basketball perspective as to what went down over the weekend. There's a big day in the state of Alabama as well. We'll get to some of those games and another big one coming up tonight as Troy and Arkansas State will go for the Sun Belt Championship, 6 p.m. on ESPN+. Arkansas State at 24-9, Troy at 22-10. As Troy got the win yesterday, as did Arkansas State. They'll meet for a Sun Belt title and a trip to the NCAA tournament this evening. So you got a lot of basketball today, by the way. You've got more conferences that will be decided today. And conferences bids that are going to come up today, 5 o'clock. Delaware and Towson in the CAA. You got that Sun Belt coming up at 6 p.m. Also at 6 p.m., the SoCon going to be decided. Wofford and Furman, as we'll get to Sanford going down a little bit later in the show. And then you get the latest tip today, not for a conference title. It'll be 10:30 on ESPN2 in the West Coast Conference. Will be your final tip today. So you got basketball all day long again today. Another massive day of hoops. We'll get to as much of it as we can today from what happened in state over the weekend and get your thoughts on Auburn and Alabama. How should Chad Baker-Mazara be handled in the postseason? How does Bruce Pearl manage this, Greg? A guy that, go back to last year's NCAA tournament, and he hurt your basketball team. And then a lot of the stuff hasn't really changed at all, but it's a heck of a conundrum because from a talent perspective and an ability perspective, he gives you a lot. How do you handle it and manage it?
I mean, I think it's you just got to quit flirting with the fine line. I mean, it just, hey, buddy, like, I love how disruptive you are. You are our version of Draymond Green. I think it's great. The opponents hate you. Like, it's a wonderful thing, but elbowing people in the back of the head, hitting people in the face when quote fingers diving after a loose ball when the ball wasn't even within reason. And then 2 or 3 other things that go on throughout the game. It's like, dude, like, calm it down a little bit. I mean, you would be probably more equipped to answer that. Like, Bruce, how do you think he was to handle this?
I think Bruce has a very specific relationship with Chad Baker-Mazara, and he's done an excellent job of managing a lot of it. I'm under, my personal opinion is this will be a lot worse under a lot of other head coaches. Not every other head coach, I'm saying. But I think Bruce has done a good job sort of reeling him in. You say you got to get it under control, you got to manage it. You can't be a liability. It's not going to change. I had a lot of texts with a lot of fans, a lot of people, friends of mine of Auburn basketball saying can't keep doing this. I was like, why would it stop? It hasn't stopped. It's who he is. So it's not going to go away. And I think you, instead of now having the discussions with Chad Baker-Mazara about what he's willing to risk or what he's doing or can he mitigate it, you need to start having discussion with your staff about how much you're willing to risk him being on the court. That's the reality of it. It's going to be a risk when he plays, because if it's a close game like it was the other day, you got a chance to put the other team on the line and give them the ball and give them an advantage to take the lead or build on the lead and steal momentum. And then maybe you're not in the game anymore, and all of a sudden that's a body that's capable that you need that's going to be gone, and you're not going to be able to lean on that individual to be able to help you either with a certain matchup or be able to give you certain things physically in a basketball game. It's just a liability. So it's a risk-reward situation now. How much of the risk are you willing to take with him in the lineup? Because there's going to be one. It's not changing, Greg. He's not going to be a different guy. You're not going to get to a tournament game and all of a sudden say, don't act that way. It's just not real. We've seen this for 2 years now. So I think now it's more of a, what exactly are you willing to do as far as putting your team at risk that could hurt your team, and is it worth it? That's the conversation that, in my opinion, Bruce Pearl's got to have. Because I think Bruce thinks he can manage him, and I think Bruce has done a great job managing him. I think it'd be a lot worse if they didn't have the relationship that they did. But at the end of the day, you're not going to completely remove it. You're not erasing this behavior. It will not go away completely. So if that's the case, what are you willing to allow potentially to have to your basketball team in a massive game? And obviously that really starts with the NCAA tournament. You got the number 1 bid in the SEC tournament. You got the best draw, and we'll see if he gets the minutes that he's normally been getting. But I don't know if you can look back now. I don't know if you can just say, you bring him down to 10 minutes a game or 8 minutes a game, because that's not what it's been. And so defensively, you've relied on him. Offensively, he's given you a spark at times. But it is absolutely going to be a risk. 800-239-9569. You want to get in. You can text in 205-834-9450. You can also tweet in at Mac and Cube. You want to be a part of the show. We'll discuss it throughout if you want to be a part of the show there. Bruce Pearl just kind of recapping that loss to Alabama from over the weekend in Neville Arena.
So we talked about in the locker room about the things that we did well and the things that we did not do well, the things that we needed to do to win that game. Obviously, those are 2 teams that are capable of getting to the Final Four. Both teams stepped up in a lot of ways and played great basketball. But as a team, I thought we had just too many defensive breakdowns, too many things that we talked about trying to do that we did not do, that we weren't locked into either in a scout. And as a result, the They had some better looks at the rim. They got downhill. They got the offensive rebounding, very similar to what Texas A&M did, except obviously Alabama shoots it better. Turn corners on us, got downhill, come over, miss a shot, backside rebound, tip dunk, and so not putting bodies on those guys and giving those guys 18 second chance points is a lot.
It is a lot, and it was something that was big for Alabama in this game. Alabama has the rebounding edge, 41-33. Alabama won in the paint, 52-40. And you go back to what Bruce said after the A&M game, that physicality is something that could be a little bit of a problem moving forward. He challenged his team on that. And back to Chad Baker-Mazara, Coach Pearl, just on what his message would be to Chad Baker-Mazara moving forward.
Well, what I'd like is for the first fouls to be called, and but I have not seen the play, so I just can't comment on whatever happened there. So obviously, flagrant 2 is something that this is his second time having it, and obviously, we're not as good a team without him, and so he takes a lot of contact. He gets hit a lot, and he can't. If it was some sort of a retaliation, he just can't retaliate.
Yeah, that's it. That's part of it. Richard Hendricks said it on the show last week. We'll ask him about it again, but he's got a massive target on his back. These officials are looking for it now. He's hardly going to be able to get away with anything. And not that he should be able to, but there are certain things on a basketball court, Greg, that I think officials are going to let go. They're not going to let anything go with him now because they're looking for it. He's on notice.
And because it's obvious that it's intentional. That's why on notice for what?
There's
the
a
guy
lot of
does
stuff in basketball that's
purpose.
intentional. People get stepped on. Their arms get hooked. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, just like in football, there's a lot of stuff that's intentional.
Yeah, well, with him, it's a joke. Like, seriously. I don't have a problem with it. I kind of like it, to be honest with you. But you can't sit there and try to defend the guy. He's undefendable. You cannot. It's his behavior on the basketball court is indefensible. I mean, it really is. And I don't know what to tell you. He's a great guy to have on your team. He's a liability.
Not when he costs you free throws, points, possessions. No, and potentially cost himself minutes when you're relying on him maybe for a matchup. Coach Pearl on if Chad Baker-Mazara is being unfairly targeted.
No, I just think that the contact is a part of the game. And, I think a year ago it was a retaliation play. My guess is, without seeing the play, there was some retaliation from getting hit, and you're going to get hit. You got to get to the next play. So Chad can't do that.
It's no different than any other sport. It's if that's what it was in his mind, it's usually the guy that retaliates that gets caught. But either way, it wasn't necessarily a clean play, and it's something that he's been put on notice for, and the officials are on notice watching him. And if they see it, there's not going to be any more warnings with him. There's not going to be any maybes and if or buts. He's going to get called. And that's what it's going to be. And it's going to hurt the team. And you should get called if it's a foul. You shouldn't get called if it's because it's you. But a lot of the stuff that he does, he brings on himself. And nobody can debate that. So it was unfortunate, not only that it happened, how it happened, when it happened in that game, for an Auburn basketball team that probably needs him for a lot of what they want to be moving forward in the NCAA tournament. But, I mean, that's where you are right now. And how he handles it, how he manages it, I think it's going to be interesting to see from Bruce Pearl's perspective as we move ahead. Again, you can be a part of it, 800-239-9569. How should Bruce Pearl, how should Auburn manage it? We'll talk with Paul Feinbaum when we come back on the other side, and then hear from Nate Oates, Mark Sears after that. Continue talking Auburn and Alabama and hoops right after this on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 7:17. Monday, March the 10th. Jocks 94.5. Watch live on YouTube. Search Jocks 945. He joins us each and every Monday thanks to our friends at Craneworks from ESPN, the SEC Network. It's Paul Feinbaum.
Lift it, load it, grade it, grind it, move it, haul it, rig it, dig it, Craneworks, Rentalworks, yeah! The big dog's got it.
Paul Feinbaum on Mac and Cube in the morning is brought to you by Craneworks. Lift it, buy it, rent it, the big dog's got it. Now, Paul Feinbaum.
Paul, always great to have you in on a Monday morning. I'm sure you have seen similar situations in other sports of what Bruce Pearl has on his hands with Chad Baker-Mazar, a guy that can help your team, but a guy that can hurt your team with antics. And just interested how you feel like he will try or wants to try to manage him or his minutes moving forward in the postseason.
Well, I think he will. I realize it's the talk of college basketball today, but having watched Bruce Pearl, he mixes love and tough love about as well as any coach I've ever seen. So, I mean, I hate to give you I know he's going to take care of it because there's no guarantee of that, but I feel confident that he will. And I think sometimes when these things get out into the open as dramatically as they have, it makes it even more incumbent on the coach. And I think, I mean, I've read all the columns and the criticism and how this is really going to affect Auburn. I don't buy that. I think these things eventually take care of themselves, and I think this one will.
I feel like it's a pretty significant prisoner in the moment mentality. Auburn lost a close game to a really desperate and hungry team at the end of the year, and I don't think it's some reflection of what they can potentially be. Especially when their best player finally looked healthy for the first time in a couple weeks. So is there a takeaway that you have from Auburn in this game?
Yeah, Greg, I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment either, because a year ago on this show, I felt very confident that Auburn was going to win the SEC tournament and go on and make a serious run at the NCAA tournament. I got the most insignificant part of that right, and then they were out of the tournament by Friday night. So I think that I am really interested to see how they approach Nashville. My gut feeling is that Bruce Pearl wants to go through the experience. I don't think he wants to lose again, because you certainly don't want to limp into the NCAA tournament with 3 straight losses, having any expectation of being the number 1 seed. So I look for them to play really well on Friday. I think they're in a little bit of a desperate mode just to change the narrative. But I still feel great about them. I think in spite of what we just got through watching last week, I still believe they're the best team in the country. I think Johni Broome is the best player, and I fully expect them to make a long run into the NCAA tournament. Very likely the Final Four, maybe Monday night.
Paul Feinbaum joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. Thanks to Craneworks every Monday. What are you hearing about the mentality or the thought process with this SEC tournament? You look at football, Paul, we've all heard differing thought processes of the SEC championship game, of games down the stretch, and how things are handled, managed. Rosters, playing time was managed a little bit differently by a lot of head coaches this past year. It's a different sport, and it's a little bit of a different mentality and attitude, but how has it shifted for a lot of these coaches heading into this particular week?
Well, Cole, I think it's one of the most unusual SEC tournaments ever. It's the most anticipated. It's the most publicized. And you guys have already talked about all the reasons why I just said that. You're very likely to have 13 schools, maybe more, going to the tournament. But I don't know if there is an urgency to win it. For the reason I laid out a minute ago about Auburn. Winning and Alabama, too. Alabama played poorly down the stretch, went to the Final Four. Auburn played brilliantly and got nowhere. So I think coaches just want to, number one, they want to have their players experience the buzz of the tournament. It is valuable to go to a hotel, get on a bus, go into an arena that is packed, that isn't your home arena or even the away arena, just to simulate what all these schools will go through the following week. But outside of a handful of schools, there really isn't much urgency. In those schools, there's not even the usual you have to win or get to Saturday to get to the tournament. I mean, there's very few schools where anything is on the line. But I think it's more just soak it in, understand it will be much more difficult the following week. And I think for SEC fans, just to celebrate this moment in time. I mean, I live in a city where I had the local news on a minute ago, and they're talking about, and we'll be there live after the ACC tournament tomorrow night. And I'm like going, why would anyone want to be live after the ACC tournament? I mean, it's so weird to be in the most basketball crazy state in the country, at least it was when I got here, and watch the sad decline of the ACC while we're sitting here and you guys in Birmingham celebrating the best conference in college basketball. It's utterly mind-boggling.
It's definitely different, Paul. As someone that lived alongside you there for 2 years, people couldn't wait for the Tar Heels to get going in hoops, and now it's like, are they still playing? What's going on? It's very, very different compared to what it once was. Help me understand this, Paul, a little bit off topic. We'll get back to basketball in a moment, but with your discussion of the ACC, they now have figured out a settlement to appease Florida State and Clemson. They're now going to pay them more with the brand initiative, all this stuff. They have a chance to make $120 million more over the next 5 years before 2030, when their buyout drops drastically to $75 million per school. I happen to think this is going to cause more harm than good, but I'm curious if you have a viewpoint on what went down in the ACC last week.
Well, Greg, if you're the commissioner of the ACC, you have to live in the moment. You plan for the future, but you can't be too hung up on 5, 6, 7 years from now, because there's a good chance you won't be the commissioner. He made the best. I'm talking about Jim Phillips. He made the best deal for the moment. He had to stop the bleeding. He had to stop the hemorrhaging. He did that. But there is a due date, as you said. And when that due date comes, it is going to be open season, I believe, on the ACC. Now, it's impossible to predict today because we're still watching the Oklahoma and Texas being digested into the SEC, while the four and the Big Ten are getting I just saw USC and UCLA in women's basketball playing for the Big Ten championship yesterday, and I almost did a double take. But by the time we turn the calendar toward 2030, all that will be different. And I think it's very likely that the ACC loses a couple of schools. It's much less expensive. I mean, that buyout price is no big deal when you think about what it was. That's pretty much in line with what Oklahoma and Texas paid a couple of years ago. So I think every conference, including the SEC and the Big Ten, are carefully looking down toward what happened at the ACC and trying to figure out. I mean, right now it's not a big item. I mean, there are way too many important issues ahead of it. But I don't think there's any doubt that the ACC put off the inevitable, and the inevitable is losing a couple of schools in the future.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that if you're going to reward the teams right now with the highest ratings on television because of their brand initiative, that's fine. And you're going to satisfy Clemson and you're going to satisfy Florida State. But satisfying those two isn't as big a deal to me as satisfying North Carolina and Virginia. North Carolina and Virginia are far more attractive to both the SEC and the Big Ten, and could theoretically get a full payout if they were to leave the ACC when that time frame runs out in 2029 or whatever. So North Carolina might, because of Bill Belichick, will receive some of that money with the brand initiative, but Virginia won't. So you're going to tick off Virginia, who is probably, besides North Carolina, the most attractive candidate to both conferences that would be willing to expand further. So that's what I don't understand. Like, why are they doing this to satisfy Clemson and Florida State when Clemson, Florida State, it's either kind of the Big Ten or nothing, is it not?
I believe you're right. And by the way, I know a lot of fans out there are going, I understand North Carolina, but what's the deal with Virginia? Well, let me explain it. Greg's 100% right. I don't talk for anybody but myself, but if you look at what the SEC has done in recent years, they just went out and got Texas and Oklahoma, the premier state school. And that's important to remember. North Carolina is standalone. It's a preeminent university, but it also has good athletics and it used to have good basketball. Virginia doesn't have that, but they do. They are a brand, and I think if you're sitting there with 16 SEC presidents, they would much more likely gravitate to North Carolina and Virginia, who I believe also are drafting partners, to use a NASCAR phrase, as opposed to Clemson, and Florida State, which for all their football prowess, and they are the last two ACC schools to win national championships, they don't offer very much in anything. They're the secondary. Clemson is inferior to South Carolina as an academic institution, and then you have the same situation with Florida State. They are behind the other state schools and as well as private schools in Florida. So I don't think either one of them have much to offer. And quite frankly, Greg, I'm not really sure why the Big Ten would want either one of them.
Paul, always great stuff. We always appreciate the time. It's good to catch up with you. You said something a little bit earlier, though, that I wanted to ask you about before we let you run, and that was how much discussion, how much talk there is, publicity there is about this SEC tournament. Could you also make the argument that maybe it matters least compared to some of the others that you're comparing it to as far as discussion and talking points?
Well, in some ways it does, but Cole, having been to that thing so many times, you get inside that stadium at Bridgestone, and it's a different world. It's really a celebration of basketball, and I think this time, for the first time, the SEC celebrates the sport like it does in Hoover with baseball and in women's softball, and what we saw yesterday in Greenville. I think who wins, what games matter probably don't matter to the same degree, but I still think from a national standpoint it will be a bonanza for the league.
It feels like the teams that are in, for the most part, are known. I know there's a little bit of work at the bottom that maybe could change some things depending on some other schools, but there usually seems like there's 5 or 6 teams we're talking about jockeying for position or fighting to even get in the tournament. And this year it's almost a known. So it'll be a fun watch. There's no doubt. And we'll have you back next Monday to recap it. Thanks for joining us today.
Can't wait. Thanks.
Paul Feinbaum joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. Thanks to our friends at Craneworks each and every Monday morning. Do you get that same feeling, Greg, that I agree with Paul? There are more talking points. There's more discussion to be had. There's going to be more publicity, more notoriety maybe for this SEC tournament than any that we've ever had, and it could mean less than any SEC tournament we've ever had because most of these teams' spots towards the top of this tournament, when you discuss seeding, are set. Yeah, there's a line or two that someone can move up or down in, but there's not 4 or 5 teams that need to do everything possible just to get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not – well, there's a couple that can solidify their standing, but gosh, what is it, 2? 2 on the bubble? I mean – with Arkansas's win this past weekend, they're in pretty good shape. With Georgia and the way they've played at times down the stretch, they're in pretty good shape. Like there's only a couple teams that are kind of vying for their life. I think it really becomes more about the possibility for the top teams, the Alabamas of the world. Like I think from our perspective, from an Alabama fan's perspective, this tournament matters greatly because I really want to secure a number 1 seed. And the only way to do that is to probably win 1 or 2 games against a couple good quad 1 opponents. And guess what? That opportunity is likely. So I don't know about you. Like, I think it might mean less for, say, Auburn. I think you guys could show up, play with 3, let Chad Baker-Mazara get a flagrant 2. Then we're playing with 2. You lose the game by 100. Guess what? You're still in good shape. Like it doesn't change. You're still the number 1 seed. It's just whether or not you're the number 1 overall seed. Duke obviously would have a chance to potentially take that from you, but is that really that big a difference? I mean, yeah, it'd be really nice to be able to play.
From a resume perspective, it is that big of a difference, though.
For sure, but it also would be nice to play, I believe, one of the Final Four sites is in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. One of the regionals.
Yeah, as it state right now, Auburn goes Lexington, Atlanta. The way
Lexington, Atlanta, correct. So like that'd be really nice.
Very.
So, but would Duke want Atlanta potentially?
Probably.
So I think for Auburn it matters from that perspective. I still think they're number 1 seed, but it'd be nice to kind of have the geographical advantages of playing in SEC towns. So that's the only thing that matters for them. But I think that matters greatly, personally.
Yeah. It just it feels like as far as heavy lifting is concerned, there are a lot more talking points that we're normally having about this tournament than we are this year. When you're talking about big picture talking points, there are absolutely more of those to be discussed with this SEC tournament than we have had in the past. It's just this actual tournament might not mean as much going towards some of those discussions that we're going to have because there are a couple of teams that you mentioned Alabama need to win 1 or 2. If Alabama loses the first game, but a couple of other teams also, specifically Michigan State, Houston, don't do well, Alabama would have the resume, in my opinion, to end up on the 1 line. So we'll see how that goes and see how that happens. We'll talk more about Alabama and Auburn basketball from over the weekend. What the win means for Bama, the loss means for Auburn moving forward. You have to wait for that conversation. One thing you never have to wait for, though, is your dental care.
That's because Family Care Dental has you taken care of. They're the urgent care office where you can be seen the same day. Several locations to make it easy on you. Hoover, Fultondale, Homewood, and Alabaster. Always very grateful to the service that you receive when you go and see my friends at Family Care Dental. Go and check them out. Really appreciate that they now have free teeth whitening for any routine appointment. And if you have an emergency, they can get you in today. They can see you on Fridays and Saturdays as well, because we know scheduling is really tough this time of year with kids' sports and activities all over the place. So they can see you on Fridays and Saturdays. Most insurance plans accept they're accepting patients of all ages, and they have several locations to make it easy on you. Call them today at 874-9605. That's Family Care Dental, 874-9605.
All right, we'll discuss kind of the usage of Chad Baker-Mazara, what that needs to be, what your thoughts are on it. Text in 205-834-9450. Call in. Phones will be open now, 800-239-9569. Are your opinions very different with Alabama and what they can be in the postseason? We'll continue to discuss those next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. College basketball over the weekend. Michigan goes down to Michigan State, 79-62. That's a big win for Tom Izzo's group as they continue to put together a fantastic season. Strong down the stretch as well. Duke took down North Carolina 82-69. Cooper Flagg 15-9 in that game. as Duke gets the ACC regular season championship at 28-3. Houston takes care of business against Baylor 65-61. They look like they're going to be able to hold on to a 1 seed as for now. Also, St. John's took down Marquette 86-84 in overtime. That's a big win there for St. John's. Texas Tech over Arizona State 85-57. Iowa State took care of Kansas State. Clemson smashed Virginia Tech 65-47. Clemson, I don't think getting enough conversation about how good a basketball team they are. I think a lot of people just put it into the excuse column that the ACC is down. Clemson's actually really good.
Really good.
Penn State upsets Wisconsin, so that'll hurt the Badgers. And when you look in the SEC, Kentucky over Missouri, it's a big win for the Cats as they look to kind of finish strong. A&M handled business against the LSU. I don't think anybody thought that was one that was really going to be in jeopardy. Coach Cal gets a nice win against Mississippi State, 93-92 in a buzzer beater for the Hogs as they get to 19-12, 8-10 in the SEC. State 20-11, 8-10 in the SEC. And Arizona went down to Kansas. I would think probably biggest win of the year for Kansas as they've been sort of struggling, but still get to 20 wins for a team that a lot of people have mentioned as being historically bad by Kansas standards. They're 20-11, 11-9 in the Big 12, 83-76. They knock off Arizona. Dickinson had 34-10 in that game.
They're still going to be a problem, though. Like, Dickinson is still a problem.
He's a great player.
I mean, I know that the Bama and Auburn game ended and it went straight to that. And it was like at that point, it was like 35-25. It was deep into like middle of the first half, but I watched a decent portion of it. And they're still, I know they're not as good as maybe the preseason expectations, but they're still not a team you want to mess around with.
Really good basketball team. Oklahoma takes down Texas on the road, 76-72. Georgia took out Vandy.
The Red River
literal shoot
around.
You can say shootout in that one because you're just shooting basketballs. It works there. Georgia took out Vandy 79-68, and Florida handles Ole Miss 90-71. So massive weekend of college basketball, both in the SEC in the state of Alabama. And you said your opinions of this Crimson Tide team have not changed greatly based on what you saw Saturday. So did you maintain the confidence with a little bit of a slide late before that game? Or did you gain some back based on what you saw in that game?
No, I was real confident because I thought Mark Sears played bad, if I'm going to be honest, did not play well. And yet the team still found a way to win. What was most encouraging to me, and I said this at the beginning, is that Grant Nelson woke up. I mean, he had been in a bit of a slumber, I feel like, for a while now. I mean, I don't feel like he's made an impactful play in a long time. But man, he was awesome on Saturday. It was great to see him energized. It was great to see him showing some emotion, taking it to the rim a couple times. He knocked down a couple threes as a result, gave him a little bit more cushion, a little more separation to be able to shoot those long range threes because he showed the threat or willingness to get to the hole. That was terrific. I loved what we saw from Cliff Omawari. I loved especially his stat line, 7 for 7 on field goals with 7 dunks. That makes me happy as well. I didn't know he had an offensive gear. And don't get me wrong, like, is the likelihood of him getting a bunch of dunks every single game, is he going to average 15 points down the stretch? Probably not.
If the team doesn't rotate on defense, he can.
Sure, but I think it was nice to know that that's there. That's available to them. If for whatever reason, guy comes off of him, you get a late dish to him down around the basket and get an easy putback. I still thought some of the rebounding was a little concerning. There were some second chance points that Auburn had that were frustrating. In particular, Janai Broom's overtime 3 that tied it there at the end. I mean, that was an easy second chance point. I think Pettiford.
It's fair, but you out-rebounded Auburn 41-33.
They did. I mean, but there were a few where it was like, it's just a lack of focus. I mean, the ball was between 2 Alabama defenders, and Pettiford just went right in there and snagged it real quick. He's awesome, by the way. I mean, he's a great player, so not ever mad at that. But I thought for the most part, it was a great performance. But seeing yourself win without your best player doing it, hardly anything, is really encouraging.
Yeah. Omiyori's big time, man. I mean, you're talking 6'11", 250. I thought defensively he gave you a little different option against Broom, and he had some struggles there.
The foul problems are always going to be there, though, with him. Like, that's the only thing. It's like, man, I wish we could just somehow, and I know he's a 5. He's gonna have some fouls, but that's the only thing that I wish he could play as hard as he does without getting into some foul troubles, because there were probably 1, maybe 2 dumb fouls I thought that were called on him that were kind of unnecessary.
I think, but when you get that extra physical presence, sometimes it's an even trade-off. You take it because, like I said, I think he offered a different option against Broome defensively that gave Broome some headaches down the stretch. And I mean, listen, he's McDonald's All-American. It's not like he came in there and nobody thought he was going to be able to play. There are a lot of people who think next year he's going to be even more of a viable option and be a big-time role guy for Alabama with what he can do down in the future. So we'll see. But it was a good option for them in this game, and it'll be an option for him in the tournament. We'll continue discussing this one. I want to go back to Mark Sears in just a moment and thoughts on his play against Auburn over the weekend. Before we do that, tell us about Shannara Flooring.
Shannara Flooring's great, and Fu has built his team on integrity and trust. And they're going to go. They're going to respect your home. They're going to get things taken care of. If you decide to adjust your floors, it's a big decision. It's expensive, and it can do more damage to your home than you realize. But at Shannara Flooring, you know that these guys are going to go the extra mile to make sure that your home is kept safe because of the attention to detail that they'll have when installing and taking out those existing floors. They also have 40,000 square feet of CoreTech flooring in stock right now. That's the pet-proof, kid-proof, 100% waterproof. That's great for kitchens, laundry rooms, and bathrooms, and everywhere. You can get 12 months financing with approved credit by calling them today. Remember, if you want to make some adjustments to your floors, call who? Call Fu. That's 205-518-6423, or you can go online at fuandyou.com.
The latest bracketology and Mark Sears versus Auburn next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Monday, March 10th, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 7:47. Mark Sears, massive buzzer beater to take down Auburn. And when this went to overtime, I think both sides kind of said, don't really like this. I had text from both fan bases, Greg, saying, don't feel good about this, hate this. I was watching it with fans of both teams, and nobody felt great about it. Like, don't want overtime here, don't need overtime here. And my initial thought was, I don't know if either team needs this right now. Really, heading into the SEC tournament, you've had a grind of an SEC schedule. You'll get a little bit of time off for the SEC tournament, but then both teams going to be either a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Do you need overtime right now for two teams that have just kind of been hanging on for dear life at the end of the season? But it made for more dramatic basketball. There's no doubt about that. And Mark Sears was just an amazing shot to walk it off.
And don't get me wrong. I think that the overtime was like, man, I really would have liked the longer this thing goes. I don't know how well it's going to work out for us at home, especially. I mean, I was sitting there thinking from an Alabama fan's perspective, like, I'm not sure I want to go to overtime. But at the same time, I look at it, I'm like, I mean, I kind of didn't hate how entertaining the game was. So if I could have an extra 20 minutes of watching it here, unobstructed views, I was pretty into that as well. So I thought it was an entertaining game. I mean, really a good game from start to finish. Game of runs where you felt like Bama is going to kind of pull away and do some really nice things, especially with the second half run. I think they went on like a 15-2 second half run. It's like, all right, we're in cruise control now, only to see Auburn respond. It was just a really entertaining basketball game.
It was very entertaining, very fun. And did you think Mark Sears was going to have that last shot? He was the first guy that I thought of. Initially, my thought was, it's got to be Nelson somehow, some way, with just the way that he's played today. And then, I mean, essentially just sort of the grit that he had showed in that game. And then, of course, Sears kind of ends up finding an opening and puts up a heck of a floater. That's a difficult shot, especially in that moment. Knocks it down, gets the win. What did you think that was going to be in that moment?
Well, and it was a shot that he had missed earlier in the game, just kind of a floater, but it was less contested. I mean, it was a much easier shot earlier in the game. But he can get to his left hand. I thought it was a really, really nice adjustment. I don't get the sense watching the play. I've seen it 7-8 times now. I don't know for sure. I'm not a basketball XO junkie. I don't know for sure that the play was designed to go to him.
No, I don't. We'll ask Richard Hendricks at 9. I don't. Like I said, I feel like that was more he found an opening.
Correct.
And took advantage of it.
I think they were trying to get it to Grant Nelson. I really believe that was the initial intent. And he said, all right, we're running low on time. I just got to do it myself. He was able to get to left hand, had a couple guys in front, was able to create a little rub, and then get there to within close enough proximity to have a decent look. So I thought it was a good play by him after what was a very forgettable first 44 minutes and 20 seconds. Much better, obviously, there. He hit 2 big free throws in overtime as well, which was really, really nice. Him and Phylon hits a couple of massive free throws there in overtime, so that was huge as well. So I thought he played well down the stretch, but it was not his best performance by any stretch. Auburn, and they have his number a little bit with making things difficult on him.
Mark Sears played all 40 minutes. He was 3 of 9 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3, and just 9 points in the game. Grant Nelson, though, as we mentioned, 8 of 15, 3 of 6 from 3. He had 1 massive block. He had 8 rebounds and 23 points, and he was a disruptor. He was an offensive threat. He was everything I think that he can be in this game. And he's a guy that, this is why, a week or so ago, when we talked to Nate Oates, I just said, I feel like he's the guy that always shows up in big moments. And I know he had kind of been absent from those big moments for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't think he's 100%. I don't think he's been 100% for a while. I think he's playing through some things, but I think he showed a lot in that game at Auburn. And I think it does bring up the question, like, if you were to go Sears Nelson, who's more important for Alabama in the postseason, just in general? And because we've seen Mark Sears go out and put up, 30 and lead the team in scoring. We've seen him facilitate some. And then we've seen him, as you just stated in this last game against Auburn, not do as much and have other guys sort of step up and have their turn. That's the way you would want it more than anything. But if you had to choose, like, who has to be better for Alabama to have the deeper run? Is it Nelson or Sears?
I still think Nelson. I think Nelson is the key. His length is unique. His ability to knock down threes is huge. I think he can play multiple positions. I think Sears is a good, solid college basketball player. I think he's really, really solid, really good player. But he's not a guy that can consistently create his own shot. I don't think he's like outrageously quick. I think he needs some help, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. He's been very, very good when the time is asked, but creating separation against elite level defense is something that has not been a huge strength of his. But he was great in the tournament last year. And if you can get him some open shots, if he can, get some dribble drive going, that's huge. The other thing I like about him, I mean, let's just be honest. Some of the teams they're going to play in the tournament are going to be a lot easier than the teams they played over the last 20 games. So even if there were times, and I know he played great in the last 5 games, 6 games or whatever, but they weren't good in those games. So I look at the numbers, they flashed the graphic up. It's like 31, 30, 35. It's like, yeah, good. They were 1-4 in the games that you showed me that he scored 30 plus or 25 plus. So that's great. But I still think Nelson is the guy that can help take this team to the next level. And it wouldn't surprise me if he plays well. I think they're tough to beat.
And we go into the NCAA tournament. We go into the SEC tournament. We keep that same question in mind with Auburn. We'll discuss that next hour. But back to how Alabama was able to get this win. We mentioned Mark Sears had that game winner. His thoughts on that game-winning basket.
I think it was a good play call because, it caused a lot of confusion, and they didn't know if they, earlier in the game, they were switching everything guard to guard. So, I did a quick hand off the Baron. They didn't switch, and I was able to get downhill with my left hand, and I was able to get it off and with enough time. So, it was a pretty good play.
And, kind of similar to what happened with Alabama against Tennessee, with where the time was, you felt like Broome not going to be as concerned about the pass, and he would flash up to be able to help with Sears there and maybe try to adjust that shot a little bit more. It didn't happen, and obviously it's a tough play because of how quickly it did take place. Also, Sears, just on what he learned about that late game execution.
I say we showed growth. We had the toughest 7-game schedule in the country, and I feel like we learned a lot from that 7 games to prepare us for the SEC tournament and March Madness.
There's no doubt, Greg, that this team's been tested down the stretch. And I think to be able to cap it off with a win at Auburn when a lot of people thought, man, they're limping into the tournament, they're limping into the postseason. Where is this team mentally, emotionally? This was everything you needed to bounce back from all of that.
Yeah, and to go and win in a hostile environment, which is great. That's always wonderful. Beat your rival, that's great. That's wonderful. But there were some really big moments in this game in which they won. There were also things to clean up. Still, a few shots close in proximity they weren't able to knock down, whether it was a missed layup or a missed putback that was relatively simple. That I think is a little bit frustrating, but man, I think all in all, it was just good to feel good about a performance offensively and defensively. I thought they defended pretty well too. I mean, the turnovers are a problem, but there's a lot to like with how things went this past weekend.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit more about it other side. There has been a massive college football hire that we want to get to, flying under the radar just a little bit because, well, number one, there's not a lot of talk about college football right now, and coaching hires at this point in the calendar are usually not taking place. We'll discuss it when we come back. Some feedback coming in via Twitter at Mac and Cube. You can always hit us up there. Phone's going to be open, 800-239-9569, on how Auburn needs to handle its lineup and what Alabama proved at Auburn over the weekend, now heading into the SEC tournament. We'll give you that schedule when we come back next on Jocks 94.5. Hour number 2 underway. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 800-239-9569. You wanted to discuss hoops from over the weekend. We'll get to the SEC tournament bracket here in just a moment. Also discuss Auburn, Alabama from over the weekend a little bit further. Exactly what that means, exactly what that's going to look like moving ahead, if that game has much impact on exactly what these two teams are going to be capable of or what they do moving forward. Russell Terry tweeting into the show, at Mac and Cube. You can always be a part there. Also, hit us up on the Higginbotham hotline, 800-239-9569. He tweets, Bama's 10-0 when Sears has 7 assists. That's the key number. He has to facilitate. Would you agree with that?
Love that. That's not really who he wants to be, though, sometimes. That's the thing that's tricky, is I feel like he wants to sometimes do it all himself, and it's obvious when he's doing that. When he's distributing, it's terrific. It's outstanding, but it doesn't happen very often. So I hope that that's continued to drive home, and I hope that people continue to acknowledge that, and I hope Coach Oates continues to press that as well.
Right. Also, Jolly tweeting into the show, I think both Auburn and Alabama have the ability to make deep runs. Final Four championship if they get it dialed in. On the other hand, both are very beatable. I think both teams down the stretch have shown a lack of consistency. We've mentioned it with a couple of Alabama players here. And now you look at, Auburn losing on the boards again, even though Janai Broome had a great game. It's something that has to be a little bit concerning moving into this tournament. Now, how many teams have the ability to be more physical than Auburn? You mentioned that with the A&M game a couple of weeks ago, Greg, and just same with Alabama. There's not a lot of teams that can run with Alabama. And I thought that was key, what Alabama did specifically early in this game, of getting shots off in a hurry, not allowing Auburn to get their defense set, and not really having to rely on the half-court set offensively. It was big for Alabama early in this game. So there are certain things that we've talked about with Sears, with how the offense is run, with Auburn, physicality, with Chad Baker-Mazara. There's some inconsistencies with both of these teams that are glaring, that if they do show up, they could get bumped out of either of these tournaments quickly.
Yeah, if shots aren't falling, and the thing I love about Alabama basketball, it makes it so fun, so entertaining, is also the thing that concerns me. Like playing fast, making sure you're getting shots off quickly, being aggressive, pedal down, press pretty much the whole game. Love all of that for sure, but if for whatever reason shots aren't falling, and yet there's still some turnovers, and it's not been a team that's been elite from a defensive standpoint all season long, I do feel like pretty good performance defensively last weekend. Then that could lead to a challenging game, maybe against a team that shouldn't really challenge them. So, it's always tough. The NCAA is tough, man. The NCAA tournament's tough. Alabama and Auburn collectively have only one Final Four between them. Neither one have played in the championship game. So it's freaking hard to win 6. It's real hard to win 4, and it's traditionally hard to win 2. So it'll be a good, solid test. But this week I'd be curious. I'm more intrigued right now by the SEC tournament than the NCAA tournament, because it's just going to be such a beatdown on a week-to-week, on a game-to-game basis nightly, to have to go through this gauntlet.
I think it's odd because in football, depending on the player, but I do think from how you play the game, you can kind of control things and it not be as glaring as far as maybe minutes played, wear and tear that's distributed amongst your team. If Auburn were to sit Janai Broome or Nate Oates were to sit Grant Nelson in Nashville, it's going to be obvious. It's going to be something that's questioned, talked about. It's going to be a distraction. So I don't know if there even is an option for some of these coaches to manage things in a different way in this tournament. Do I think that either, or even if you looked at a team like Florida, would be truly upset if they got bounced in the first round? You want to win every game. But I do think those coaches would probably look at it as we'll take the rest and we'll be fine. I'm so confused personally as to what the mentality is. You want to think that everybody goes up there and says, we want to win this tournament. We want the banner. We want the trophy. We want the T-shirts, whatever the hell it is. But at the same time, how much does it matter when you're no worse than on the 2 line, or you're maybe the number 1 overall seed no matter what, and you could use a little bit of rest. Your guys could use a little bit of a break, and you'll get a little bit of a break heading into this. But I just don't think in basketball, like we've talked about with football, how some things are going to be handled later in the season, Greg. I don't know if you can manage it as easy as you could in football, outside of just sitting your quarterback or sitting your running back who had 247 carries on the season. Like you're not going to be able to do that. But how do teams go into this mentally? Is it any different than it's been the last month of the regular season?
I wouldn't want, personally, I'd want to give it my all. I feel like practicing bad habits or altering the way we've substituted all regular season, all that. I mean, I don't want it to create bad habits. I don't want to create disruption in the rhythm and the chemistry that we've developed over the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. I'm playing my best guys, and God forbid something happens to them, they get banged up. That's awful, but I want to go win this weekend. Yeah, I'm not one that's like, oh, a loss is good for you. No, it's not. It allows the guys to focus. No, it doesn't. It's basketball. They're between 19 and 22. They'll survive. Give me a freaking break. Like, go play the game. I know it's been mentally taxing for the last several weeks since conference play has started. I get that, but you'll be fine. If you're 40 years old, then all right, I can understand load management. Janai Broom's close, but not quite that old yet.
I was going to say, when you said 22, there are members, I believe, of both rosters that are ahead of that. So should probably expand that just a smidge, but no difference as far as how you should be able to bounce back and what you should be able to do. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what it looks like, minutes, how they're distributed, if it is any different for these teams that are coming up. Charmaine tweeted in over the weekend, can we please devote a 30-minute segment to Nelson's dunk and the Crimson Crane that followed on Monday? Because what? Exclamation point, 3 question marks. As a Bama alum, I've never been prouder. The ultimate petty jester. Woohoo. How much time would you like to discuss to that?
I think it's hilarious how many people are trying to act like that's an Auburn thing.
There's not as many as you think.
There's enough.
I would like for you to give me one other than Philip Marshall.
Okay, well, that's one. He's a writer. I'm sure he's convinced
enough.
many.
I'd like for you to just hand us another. Just one other, please.
I don't know. Several Auburn friends. Like, oh, he was mocking them. Like, okay, well, what about the mocking? Bruce Pearl said that's our thing, and you could see you'd read his lips.
Yeah, I'm not a lip reader, so I don't know what. I can't do that. I don't have that skill like all of Twitter does.
Hey, say what you want. It's called the Crimson Crane. If you're trying to refer to that as something that is Auburn-centric.
I am not, nor have I ever.
Not saying you.
I would also not say on a national broadcast that meant War Eagle.
Was that national or regional?
Same. Pay-per-view, I think.
I don't know. I don't think too much of it. I mean, it's an emotional game. I don't worry too much about antics that are not a big deal. The amount of people that get wound up and bent out of shape about this stuff is like, golly, man, take a chill pill.
I love the fact that the group of guys that I was watching that game with, that was not even a real talking point.
Are you suggesting you have...
It's just part of it. Like, it's just, if you don't want a guy to shoot you the bird or do the Crimson Crane or... What was in Major League 2, the guy that when he hit a home run, he did kind of
marbles?
Yes. If you don't want anybody to do any of those things in your face, knock him into the third row of the stands on an attempted dunk, and that will not take place. Now, you might get ejected from said game, but that is the one way to make sure that doesn't happen. Don't let opposition dunk in face. Celebration will not be had. It's that easy.
Why did Auburn fans think it deserved a flagrant? Like, what did they want from it?
I'm not sure. I don't penalty vulture, nor do I whistle vulture. So I could care less how it happens, what happens, when it happens. I didn't lose my expletive over Chad Baker-Mazara. I didn't lose my expletive over Grant Nelson. It's a sport. It's competition. It's a game. It's heated. It's competitive. It's a rivalry. It's not an Iron Bowl, but it is a rivalry, and it does mean a lot. So why, and here's the thing, in my opinion, this is the last thing I really care to say about any of it. If it was your team that did it, you would love it. If it's your team it's being done against, you're going to hate it and you're going to be mad at it. That goes for Alabama. That goes for Auburn. That goes for Duke. That goes for Carolina. That goes for Marquette. That goes for Drexel. That goes for Florida State. It's any team. You get pissed off when it's done to you. You love it when your team does it. That's all there is. It's if you can't see it that way, then you're watching the game with blinders on and you have an inability to look in the mirror. It's just real. That's all it is. Were thoughts going through my mind of next trip he were to take to the lane, it'd probably be very Lambeer-Rodman-esque. Yeah, that went through my brain when I watched that. But I also didn't get my feelings hurt about the fact that he did it because I know there's one way to stop it. Stop him from dunking on you. That's all there is to it. So
did Auburn not do it like 2 weeks ago?
After the game, yeah, on their court. So the same thing with sitting there putting your fingers up to your ear like you're on the phone, calling God after the game in your locker room. Good. They deserve to do it. They beat you. That's what happens when you lose. Now, we could talk about, be a good sport and shake hands and the whole thing like that. Okay. But like you're telling me the best sport on planet Earth never goes and celebrates on their own? Okay, a photograph came out of it. Great. Congratulations. If your feelings are hurt by that, then the next time you play that team, you should remember that and you should take that out on said opponent. And that doesn't mean that you sweep the leg. That just means you play with effort and execution to the point that that cannot happen again. That's all. Why does there have to be so much more to it? If you wanted a technical to be able to, here's the other part. If you wanted a technical to be called to help you in the game, that tells me there's a problem with your team and that you're worried about your team not being able to execute well enough to go win said game. That's why I never begged for penalties, because I was always under the mindset that you should just be able to win the game. If you need flags, if you need whistles to win a game, that's a you problem. It's not the other team's problem. That is a problem with your team that you think they are incapable of winning the game straight up. And guess what? That is a real issue with any team, any game, anywhere, anytime. If you go in thinking, we better get 5 holding penalties or we're in trouble, how in the hell are you going to win that game? If we don't get 2 technicals and get some free shots and some extra possessions, we are not going to win that game. What strategy is that? And keep in mind, folks, you'll be with people in the next month watching a lot of games that depend on that and lean on that. Now, not that their team does, but they do mentally and emotionally.
Yes.
They will be rooting for it out loud, wanting whistles called, wanting free throws, wanting possessions because of that stuff. I don't root for it. Sorry. I don't. And nor do I care about it because I know how to handle it. And certain people don't want to handle it that way. So that's on them. Mark wants to discuss Alabama and Auburn. He's on the Higginbotham hotline. Welcome in, Mark.
Hey, how y'all guys doing?
We're great. Thank you.
Good. Well, I've been coaching a pretty good long while, and, the situation is happening with the guy at Auburn, and I'm not going to use his name just because I don't think you need to say his name. The issue that Pearl, I think, has is that, probably the best way to control that kid if you're the opposing team is to have him on the bench. And the best way to get him on the bench is to get under his skin. And, I've coached players like that, and they're in a situation where, if I'm the opposing coach, I make sure my players don't do anything cheap or anything along that line, but they try to get under his skin because he gets so distracted about trying to get even that it takes his mind out of the game, and now you've kind of negated the things that he does really well because he's a heck of a player. He's very talented. But when he loses his mental focus on what's going on because he's busy trying to get even or trying to do something else, then that puts that helps the opposing team. And I think that's where Pearl's got to try to get that kid to almost take it as a compliment that they're trying to get under his skin, but not let him do that.
How do you manage his emotions if he's on the bench, Mark? Because I would think that the internal frustration would just continue to build if he wasn't playing. And then when he did play, all that's going to pour out anyway. Like that, it's a really tough spot. And I'm just interested if you've had to manage it in that direction at all.
Well, pine time, can cure a lot of ills. The only issue I ever had with the whole situation with him was not that, I didn't like what he did, but I'm just saying his reaction afterwards, instead of getting ticked off about, man, I've hurt my team, I can't believe I did that again. He's trying to laugh it off and I guess, cope with it by thinking it's funny and that he's the victim. And he kind of is the victim because, you know, you can watch the games and, you know, everybody talks about the guy that retaliates. Well, they know that. So it's like, hey, you know, if you've got him on, if you're boxing him out, make sure you hit him hard. You know, not anything cheap, but you may let him know you're there. And there's no telling what he's going to do. And he's so busy trying to get even with you, he forgets about the rebound. He forgets about the other things. And, you know, once he gets through that part of it, the middle part of like, well, I'm really hurting my team, because I know he knows that, but I think the demeanor that he comes across with would upset his teammates as well as the fan base for sure.
Absolutely. That's a great call, Mark. Thanks for the thoughts, man. Really appreciate that. Greg and I obviously never been in that situation. Emotions in basketball are tough to manage because it's so much more visible at a lot of spots than it is in football. I promise you, things at the line of scrimmage happen from an emotional standpoint that are not seen very often and that nobody knows about. So,
but you also have a built-in break when the defense is on the field.
Well,
like when you're playing basketball, you're going both directions.
Also. I mean, you got 30 seconds, a minute in between plays to at least gather yourself a little bit. Like you said, you got to go turn it on, all of a sudden go play defense.
Or plan your revenge.
I thought Mark stated that extremely well, and I haven't really heard it that way, that his biggest problem is enacting revenge, and he spends more time concerned about that than he does the game. And essentially, you're distracting yourself at that point. So your emotions and one of your skill sets is then working against you. And we've seen it with, let's go down the laundry list of guys in all of sports, whether it's John McEnroe, Bill Romanowski, Dennis Rodman, Draymond Green. It's the same with all of them. If you let your emotions get the best of you, you're essentially distracting yourself and you're taking yourself out of the game when you think you're taking somebody else out of it, or you're utilizing that to try and distract the other team. And that's where it's such a difficult management process for Bruce. Because Mark's also right. He gives you different length. He gives you the ability to get the ball out. He gives you something offensively that can help at different points in time. He's a good player that does different things, and he can be a real problem from a matchup perspective. But if he's going to cost you possessions and points, specifically in big moments of games, is it worth it? And can you afford to have it? I don't know the answer to any of it. I don't, because I don't coach basketball, and I never have. So I don't know what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. I do know if you're moving out of your home, who you should call.
B. Crocker Moving Search, a local company owned by an Iraq War veteran, Eric Crocker. Crocker believes in hiring movers you can trust, complete full background checks, and run drug tests on every single employee. These are good guys, and you can trust them in your home. When they did your whole home pack to move, your company headquarters, which across country, or just want them to come rearrange your living room, these guys got you covered. They also do deliveries for furniture that you've purchased and need to get to your home. So call or visit them online today for a free quote. The website is crockermovingservices.com. That's crockermovingservices.com. Support your veterans by choosing Crocker Moving Services for your next move.
All right, so a couple of folks that are tweeting into the show. Keith Moore, he said, fans are like voters. Neither. I'll still admit we're going to go both ways on certain words. Can see the problem with their own side. But totally fair. I mean, we are blinded often by caring. It's blatant. Charmaine tweets back in, thanks, guys. Couldn't agree with that. Cole Cubelic more. Lisa Ross tweets in, Bruce Pearl cared a lot about Grant Nelson's post-dunk gesture, a ton. Even if Cole doesn't care, Bruce Pearl acted like it was the biggest deal of the game. I don't know what Bruce thought the biggest deal of the game was, but I know Bruce is trying to do what's best for his team in the moment. How much he cared about the actual incident, I do not know, but he's going to do what he thinks can give his team an advantage at that point in time. And if that meant a possession and free throws, then yeah, he's going to do it.
His job is to get those calls. His job is to try to influence the officials to get those calls. I think a fan's job is to understand sometimes, to take a step back and say, okay, hang on. We don't need this. I've always thought, and we've talked about it already. I mean, you hit it on the nail on the head perfectly. Penalty vulturing is a loser's mentality. I don't subscribe to that.
Nope.
I went to the Nick Saban School of Personal Accountability. You are in charge of what it is that you put forth. My son, after the game, in basketball, every single time he doesn't make a shot or whatever it is, they fouled me. No, they didn't. It's your job to avoid the foul. Same thing with all the kids. Oh, he hit me in the arm. Okay, well, don't get so close to him next time. Oh, well, I hit it to the outfield and they wouldn't let me run to second base. Well, I'm sorry. It's too bad. In their eyes, it didn't get to the outfield, so therefore you get to only advance one base. Personal accountability.
Yep.
I mean, and I just don't think there's enough people with that kind of mentality. It's a loser's mentality, frankly. I can't believe how many people outwardly subscribe to it. I'd be embarrassed if I was sitting there begging for a whistle.
It's pretty simple to me. Is just, did they call it? No, that's not a foul. Did they throw the flag? No, it's not a penalty. That's
you know that the games are fixed and rigged, obviously.
We don't have the script, though, here, so we don't know how to manage it and how to operate
it. Has to be rigged. Has to be.
Has to be. All right, we'll continue talking that. Some other in-state basketball news and that college football coaching decision that we mentioned coming up next on Mac and Cube in the morning. $8:24, Monday, March 10th, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 800-239-9569 if you'd like to get into the show. 800-239-WJOX. Text in 205-834-9450. Want to go back to college basketball. Going to get to some in-state college basketball news from over the weekend. But first, there has been a college football coaching hire. Bowling Green, who we announced Scott Leffler was going to take a job with the Eagles staff as their quarterback coach. Odd timing, difficult timing on the calendar as far as essentially season being over, portal window being closed, spring practice a couple weeks away, and he decides to leave. And Bowling Green now going to go get Eddie George, who I think surprised a lot of folks with the early success that he had as their new head coach. Not a ton of coaching experience, Greg, but a massive name, and somebody who brings legitimate credentials, regardless of what you talk about that he's done or has not done as a head coach, but just football credentials, he's going to have them. And now Bowling Green going to take just a little bit of a flyer because of that experience level in as their next head coach. What are your thoughts about Eddie George taking over for Bowling Green?
I mean, I think it's awesome. Love it for him. I hope it all works out. Hope he ends up winning a ton of games and we see him in the Power 5 real soon. I mean, I think this is a pretty cool way of doing it. I mean, you start at Tennessee State, you build that thing up to the point in which you win a conference title for the first time in 25 years. And then you transition and prove that you can do it at this level at a place that has had some decent success the last couple of years. Like Bowling Green's been a bit of a problem for some folks the last couple of years, which is highly encouraging. So pretty awesome that he's getting this chance. Eddie's a great guy. Known him for a long time, dating back to his time when he was with the Cowboys, and be really curious to see how he does.
He led Tennessee State this past season to the FCS playoffs to share the OVC Big South title. It's his first title, like Greg said, since 1999. He's been there the last 4 years, so proven that he can get in and find ways to win. And it'll be just as heavy of a lift at Bowling Green, having called a couple of their games the last few years, talking to Scott Loeffler about it. There's one thing, if Derek Vandermeer, the vice president of athletic strategy at Bowling Green, were to ask me my advice, not that he gives two rips about what I would say,
Come on.
It would be have patience. This will not happen overnight.
Why?
It's because Bowling Green is going to, anybody who is a decent above average player, you're going to lose them. You're not going to have them back. But you will have some other capabilities of getting some players from the higher level who are maybe more talented than you could have ever gotten with what God's gifts given to them are. You'll be able to go maybe pluck a few of those and bring them down. Roster turnover will be great and will be something that is probably difficult to manage. The one concern that I would have is that, Loeffler brought an offensive scheme system to the table, and he was able to sort of move some things along with that. And so I think the coordinator hires for Coach George are going to be big because you're not going to be able to go in and win because you're a good head coach. You're going to have some things in place to be competitive in a league that strategically wins a lot of times just with offense. And player turnover would be my bigger concern, and how you're going to run your team, mainly offensively. I think defense, a lot of times at that level with those teams, it's going to be hit and miss regardless. When I've done games in CUSA, I've done games in the MAC, there are multiple coaches that have just said, listen, man, best quarterback's going to win most days. You find a way to mitigate it. You find a way to make his life difficult. And if you can do that, you give yourself a better chance. But then you also talk to, certain guys in that league. Jason Kandel will tell you, we throw it all over the place. But come early November, late October, you better be able to run the ball. Because all of a sudden you're going to see 30-mile-an-hour winds. It's going to be 19 degrees. And there's going to be sleet. And there's going to be snow. And you can't throw it 45 times in a game. So I think understanding the competition, the league, also important, but Eddie will get that. And I think he's got a chance to do good things. And I think this could be a replica of what he did at Tennessee State. He goes in there and starts to win in 2-3 years and wins more than is expected year 4. His name's going to be mentioned for even bigger jobs. And he'll have a chance to do that again. So I think it's a great hire for Bowling Green. I mean, listen, we're talking about it today. A lot of people are going to talk about it today.
Yeah, when was the last time we talked about Bowling Green?
He can walk into it was 2 weeks ago when Loeffler left. But other than that, not a whole lot. But he can walk into living rooms. He can go talk to kids, and they're probably going to know who he is. Their parents are going to know who he is. He's going to have relationships that he's built all over football. They're going to be extremely valuable to him. Guys he can go talk to, high school coaches, other college coaches, position coaches. His Rolodex is going to be overly valuable with the way where the portal is right now and the way player movement is. That's going to be something that benefits him greatly. So I'm really interested to see how it goes, because that's not often the path of the MAC school. Think about it. How many big name coaches have been big names before they've gone to coach in the MAC? It's usually they go get the guys that know the territory, that played there, that have been around it a little bit. This is not often the path of the MAC program. So I'm hopeful that it works. I want it to work for Eddie George. He's a likable guy, and you want to see guys that go in and put the work in and have success early, be able to continue to move up the ranks. So just a really interesting hire that I'm interested to see how it plays out.
I'm really curious, and I haven't watched any Tennessee State. I'm not going to try to pretend. Let's tell you I have. I haven't. I don't know his coaching philosophy. I don't know any of that. I know he's a good guy, hard worker, and a guy that'll likely be able to relate to the players. And I don't know what Bowling Green's NIL is, but you're 100% right. Anytime they lose a guy, we're in trouble, right? Anytime they drop a guy, it's a wrap. But at the same time, they've been able to win, and they've found. I think Connor Bazelak was their starting quarterback last year.
Yep.
So you can go and get some.
Look at Harold Fannin, who led the nation in receiving. I mean, it tied in for them last year. They found a way to get him somehow. So you had him.
Yeah, I mean, you can go and get guys that are under the radar that maybe don't check the size speed combination, and they find a way to move the ball.
You think about the other guys who have sort of used this as a springboard: Urban Meyer, Dave Clawson, Dino Babers. Leffler was considered a success there, right? Would we agree?
100%.
He was 27-41. That's where the program is, because when he took it over, it was as bad as it could be, and it was bad the first couple of years. And he had to revamp the roster. He had to get guys out. He had to make some coaching changes. It's not an easy lift because the resources there are not plentiful, and that's not just Bowling Green. That's at that level. So. But I think Eddie's got the relationships to go in there and potentially be able to do some damage. I'm interested to watch it and see how it goes, see how it plays out. We'll talk some in-state hoops, not just Alabama and Auburn, some other things that took place over the weekend. On the other side, but first I want to tell you about Game Day Men's Health. If you are feeling on edge, if you're lacking sleep, Game Day Men's Health wants to help you today. And there's a lot of different ways that they can do it. It could be the effects of low testosterone. So what they're going to do is you go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com. You schedule a free appointment. They're going to give you a free PSA test, a free testosterone test to find out where your health is right away. Maybe it's just you're overweight, and getting some of that weight off could help you with a few of those things. They've got the programs to be able to help you with that holistic approach to health and wellness at Game Day Men's Health. Minimal upfront cost from the programs that they offer to you. So you can book that consultation now at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Save 10% on any program that they have by mentioning Cube when you walk in the front door. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Schedule that consultation today and see what they can do for you to make you feel better. All right, more in-state hoops when we come back next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. More comments coming in on exactly how Chad Baker-Mazara should be managed by Bruce Pearl upcoming in the postseason. Speaking of postseason, Nate Oates visiting with ESPN Radio this morning, discussing on what his message will be to his basketball team now that it's March, now that it's tournament time.
That win against Auburn can get us going confidence-wise. So, I mean, our messaging going into March is you prepared the whole season. You prepared all your lives, really, for this. I mean, this is when college basketball players make their names in March. Like, now's the time to really step it up. And then as far as the coaches go, we got to be super efficient with how we use their time because we don't want to overdo it. You can't practice too long. You can't overdo it with them mentally. So we got to be extra prepared so that we can present them with the information they need and have a practice that's super efficient. And then I think it's our job to pump them full of confidence. Like, this isn't the time to be ripping them up and dragging them down. Like that's if you want to make a point on some stuff, this isn't the time to do it. Now's the time to get all these guys playing the most confident basketball they can.
It's wild how that confidence can shift so quickly, too. There were a lot of folks that were down on this Alabama team Friday. That what have they gone 2-4 in their last 6, and Grant Nelson hadn't shown up, hadn't seen him in a while. Sears had been up and down and worried about the team, physicality, different things like that. Now all of a sudden you hear Nate right there, Greg. We can use this as a springboard into the tournament. This can be the boost of confidence that we needed. This can inject life into us, and all of a sudden you could ride that for 2-3 weeks. That can happen in the first round of the tournament. We've seen teams limping into the tournament, and then all of a sudden, here we go. They're on fire, and you get an incredible weekend out of them. It can go from one weekend to the next in the tournament, where a team looks lights out, and then all of a sudden can't hit anything. So that's one of the cool things about basketball, specifically college basketball, is how fast that momentum can hit, how quickly you can catch fire, and sometimes how long you can ride it.
For sure. And I think that, look, confidence is a really, really powerful tool. Really powerful tool. If you don't have it, you don't really have much of a chance in the postseason. Win or go home. If you're not feeling super confident about what you guys are trying to do or what kind of effort you can put forth or how you're going to execute in difficult situations, how you're going to inbound the ball in a critical moment, if you don't have confidence, you're dead. So I completely agree with that line of thinking. Like, at this point, progress is probably not going to be made. Like, let's just acknowledge you kind of are what you are at this point. Now, where you can make progress is mental progress. You can make guys feel better about themselves because you're not going to be like, hey, we got to stop turning the ball over. I mean, all right, yeah, fine. We understand that. But you can't really address that at this point. It's over. You're only guaranteed 2 more games. So I think trying to make wholesale changes is not the approach right now. It's really just try to tweak and build the guys up.
Also, just funny how listen, I don't think that Nate is far off from probably a ton of other basketball coaches and how they approach this time of year and their thought process. But you think you'd ever hear a college football coach say, yeah, we got to back off these guys this time of year. Like, it's rivalry weekend, man. Like, we can't tell them that they're doing this wrong. We can't get on them. But I just don't think that ever changes for football coaches. I think that stays pretty constant. But emotions in basketball, and like we said, how streaky basketball can be, you can see why that would be your mindset going into this part of the year.
No question, but it's different. I mean, basketball, you got to play at both ends of the floor. I think confidence can – the reason why you play better defensively sometimes because you're playing well offensively. It's just the reason why there's more upsets in basketball is because guys allow their poor performance on offense affect their effort levels on defense. It happens all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's the right approach this time of year.
It's going to be cool to watch, cool to see kind of moving forward where these teams go. The draw in the SEC tournament will look like this. It'll begin on Wednesday. At noon, you'll get South Carolina and Arkansas. After that, Texas, Vanderbilt, then LSU, Mississippi State. The late game will be Oklahoma, Georgia. Auburn will play the winner of South Carolina, Arkansas, who plays Ole Miss. The winner of that game, be it South Carolina or Arkansas against Ole Miss, will take on Auburn in the early game on Friday. And then Alabama will be at the bottom of the bracket with Oklahoma, Georgia winner taking on Kentucky, who will then take on Alabama. Tennessee will play after Auburn on Friday. They'll get the winner of Texas, Vandy's winner versus Texas A&M. So if you're Auburn, I don't think you want to see Texas A&M in that side of the bracket. That will be one thing that may be a little bit disappointing. Obviously, that Tennessee game close there in Auburn. And then the LSU Mississippi State winner will play Missouri, which will then play Florida. And then obviously the winner of that game will go on to play potentially Alabama. Auburn potentially get Tennessee, Texas A&M, Vandy, or Texas. When you saw the draw laid out, what did you think, just specifically for Auburn and for Alabama?
I mean, I don't feel like there is a favorable draw. I mean, looking at it all, I don't know how you see it. Is there
Florida.
You think their draw is easy?
Yes, because I think if you take Mark Mitchell out of the game against Missouri, you have a massive advantage, and I think Florida is so much more athletic than Mississippi State or LSU. I think there's one player that you can neutralize for Mississippi State as well, and I think Florida has the guard play and the bigs to be able to do that. They have a recent win against Alabama, who they could get on Saturday. I think Florida got the draw of this tournament, in my opinion.
How much of that? But I like Missouri a lot, and Missouri's a good team.
Missouri's a good team who I do think is largely carried by one individual. So I think I'm fine with if I'm Florida, I'm fine playing Missouri in the first round. I'm good. We'll take it.
I don't know. I think they're all tough. I think
they're all tough.
I think Auburn's got a pretty favorable draw. I mean, Arkansas is dangerous.
To win this tournament, if you're telling me Florida has to play Missouri, then Bama, then Auburn, or Missouri, then Kentucky, then Tennessee, it's not going to be an easy ride for anybody. None of them.
No.
But if you're asking me who got the favorable draw comparatively to the others, it's Florida. I don't think there's any question, because we saw what A&M did to Auburn. Tennessee has some similar capabilities to be able to do that to Auburn. Auburn physically has not been great the last 3 weeks. So if that's the case, you get two of the more physical teams, not just in the SEC, but of all of college basketball, that you could see in your second game. Now, am I overly concerned about, Arkansas, Ole Miss, South Carolina? No, but Ole Miss physically gave Auburn a little bit of headaches the last time that they played. I just don't think they can score enough to really give Auburn true headaches. So that's why I would probably lean that. I mean, Kentucky, I do think kind of coming on late, they have ways of giving Alabama a few problems. Can they truly run with Alabama? I don't really think so. But also I think too, when you're talking about maybe getting Kentucky, who, by the way, we know what that arena turns into when Kentucky's playing. It's a literal home game for them. So, and that's going to be just about anywhere that's a neutral site. That's BBN Travels. We know that. So you could potentially get Kentucky, then Florida, then Tennessee or Auburn. Like that's asking a lot, man. So I think Florida, in my opinion, if you're talking about the 3 or even the 4, you want to include Tennessee, gets the better draw.
Yeah. I mean, I think all that's fine. I don't think there is necessarily an easier draw.
There's not an easy draw, no.
I still think that Auburn's got a pretty favorable look. Now, Arkansas is dangerous, for sure. Arkansas is super dangerous. Ole Miss is dangerous. We've seen both those teams very, very capable at times. I think if you also look at the pathway, I mean, Tennessee's got a brutal stretch, I think, because you could have to play A&M second game, and that'll be just an absolute bloodbath.
Yep.
I mean, it'll be super
36
physical.
to 42.
Yeah, that's the type of game that'll just wear you out. So the winner of that game, assuming Texas A&M gets there, the winner of that game is going to be pretty lethargic if Auburn can win their first game of the tournament. I would think. I think they'd have heavy legs, relatively speaking, based on how the game before went. So I don't hate the setup for Auburn at all to at least get to the semis or to the championship at all.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And it's going to be a fun tournament, like you said. Either way, there's no easy draw. The amount of great games that we could get, like you said, Bama, Kentucky, Bama, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Auburn, A&M again after what just happened. We could potentially get Auburn, Alabama in the SEC tournament championship game, which, I mean, the amount of ways that game would be referenced that are annoying would be unlimited and forever, everlasting. But either way, I mean, you get Tennessee, Florida in the championship game, Tennessee, Kentucky in the championship game. Well, there's I mean, Auburn, Kentucky again after what the Tigers just did in Lexington. There's a lot of ways that this thing could play out that could be a lot of fun. It is going to be must-see TV. I think, like you said, it's going to be one of the most high-profile SEC tournaments we've ever had. It's just how much is actually going to change big picture for some of these teams. I don't think it's on par with what it usually is. I don't think that changes the dynamic of it, though, because like Paul said earlier on the show, and if you missed that, you can catch the podcast, jocksfm.com, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get yours. Go watch it again on YouTube. Once these teams take the court there, the competitive juices begin to flow. And we've seen those arenas begin to, even oppositions of teams or other fan bases latch on to other teams, either because of who they're playing or because they just want to see them win. That also happens. And so that arena does weird things when teams get in there and start to play, and it's just going to make it that more compelling and that much more fun. So I'm excited about it. It all gets going on Wednesday. We'll have coverage of it right here on Jocks 94.5 as it continues. But don't forget, there is a little bit of cool weather going around. There's also a little bit of flu still going around. Not to mention pollen season right around the corner. Make your home healthier with Trane's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. Removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus. 100 times more effective than standard air filters. 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. Find a Trane dealer near you at Trane.com. Remember, it's hard to stop a Trane. More college basketball. Like I said, some of the in-state hoops from over the weekend that we need to discuss. We'll do that next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. More commentary coming in on Alabama, Auburn, college hoops, where things should go, where things are. We'll continue to discuss those. 800-239-9569 if you want to get in to discuss those. You can tweet in at Mac and Cube, where we have a couple of responses coming into the show. Steve Sample responds to the poll question that was put out a little bit earlier today on how Bruce Pearl should manage Chad Baker-Mazara moving into the postseason. His response: maybe reevaluate their recruiting criteria. So don't take 4 and 5 stars. Would be your response to that.
Love that.
Definitely the dumbest response of the day that we've had. Also, Michael Kirby tweeting in 12 games and 3 nights at the SEC tournament is a basketball junkie's dream. I don't think anybody would deny that, not to mention everything else that's going to be happening around college basketball. Lance Barden tweets in Mizzou beat Florida at Florida this year, but I'm sure Florida will be fired up to get another shot at Mizzou. I know what the matchup is right now. I'm not overly concerned about that specific match. I'm trying to get the exact date of when that game was because it feels like it was 7 months ago. That was January 14th, by the way.
That's not that long ago.
No, definitely not.
Just like a week or two.
Let's see. L to Missouri.
Like the second SEC game of the year.
Only played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Only 14 games in between that. So I'm sure their minds are right there on that loss still. I know what the matchup is now. And if I'm Florida, not overly concerned about Missouri, who just lost to Kentucky at home. So, again, I think Florida got the best draw in the SEC tournament. That's
of a lot of draws that are all terrible. Florida got the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
it's not that hard to wrap your head around. Nobody has an easy draw. Cole simply thinks it'd be more manageable to beat Missouri than it would be to beat Ole Miss, to beat possibly Texas A&M, and to possibly beat Kentucky. By the way, who can push back on that?
But it's also matchups. Like, do I like the Auburn A&M matchup? No, absolutely not. Florida, Missouri, I just feel better about Florida right now. I mean, Kentucky just beat Missouri, but it doesn't mean that the Kentucky all of a sudden scary for Alabama. It is Kentucky, though.
Yeah.
So there's talent, and there's a fan base that's going to be rolling in there. It's going to help. It's the way it is every year. None of the draws are overly favorable. It's just if you're comparing the 4 that start on Friday, I'll take Florida's draw.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Knowing my guard play, knowing what Condon's capable of doing, I'll take that draw.
How much of that has to do with just how good Florida is?
A lot.
I think a lot of it has to do with that.
But also, it doesn't feel like there are as specific styles that have been as problematic for Florida as there have been for Auburn. And maybe because some of those are more recently, you look at it a little bit of a different way. So I'll take Florida's draw.
I don't have any problem with that. I think Florida, if I had to pick a team to win the whole thing, Florida's on the real short list right now. They are that good. They have that much length. They have that many players that can fill it up. They are excellent, and they're well coached. So I don't have any problem with your statement whatsoever.
Ed Wentz tweets in, got to go. We saw what happened with Yale. He'll be taunted by other teams the rest of the way. He just doesn't have the level of self-control needed for the big time. So, received technical in game, kickoff team? It feels a bit aggressive, but.
It wasn't technical. It was flagrant 2, and that's his second one. But I don't think you need to necessarily kick him off the team. I like having him out there personally. Like if I were an Auburn fan, while his antics would frustrate me, I think he is the Draymond Green of Auburn basketball. Like everybody hates Draymond. They hate playing against him. He is a constant nuisance, but he's nice to have on our side. So I think the good is still going to outweigh the bad when it comes to Chad Baker-Mazara.
Just be fair, tweeted in, if it were his first time, I'd say a game. Repeat offender, I would take 10% of his NIL and suspend for SEC tournament. And good luck recruiting against that moving forward. Melvin in Birmingham wants to chime in on the Higginbotham hotline. Welcome in, Melvin.
Hey, thanks. I'm an Auburn fan, and I've seen some things that Chad Baker has gone through, even going back to Yale last year. I was just wanting to ask you and Greg at what point do you think it's other teams are looking at him saying, okay, if we do, a few things toward him or whatever and get him going and we can get him out of the game like they did Saturday. Do you think certain teams are going to game plan to say, hey, if we rough him up a little bit or bump on him a little bit that, he'll get out of his game, he'll get in his head, and then, hey, that's a player that Auburn really needs on the court. That's out of the game again. I mean, at what point does Chad or his teammates grab him and say, hey, man, look, we need you out here. So the antics got to go. I just want to know.
It's a great question, Melvin, and it's a difficult balance because it's the same thing that we referenced with Bruce having to manage him. If all of a sudden you begin instructing your team to physically go at him, try to get in his head, try to do things to get him out of his game, you're distracting your team. And you're taking away from the rotation defensively or offensive sets to all of a sudden go out there and say, all right, let's place an emphasis on trying to rattle this guy. Do you work against your team's mentality when you do that? None of us really know. We'll talk more about it next. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Hour number 3 underway. Talk some more SEC hoops in just a moment with Richard Hendricks, brought to us by Pizza Pulls Live on Fanatics Live. Each and every day, if you're looking to get back into the hobby, looking for different cards, be it basketball, football, baseball, you want to get into card breaks, don't want to go pay the high prices for the entire box, Pizza Pulls is where you need to be, and you can do it via Fanatics Live. We'll tweet a link out for Pizza Pulls. You can go save $25 if you sign up today for any hits that you want to try to go get in breaks at Fanatics Live. That's fanaticslive.com. And they bring us Richard Hendricks, former Alabama great, now calling basketball games for ESPN, and does an amazing job. Richard, you spent extra time with us last week, and one of the topics of conversation was Chad Baker-Mazara. You had a little bit of a different perspective on it than a lot of other folks did. How do you view the job for Bruce Pearl now managing him moving into the postseason? What should it be? What could it be? How does it need to be any different?
Oh, wow. You know, it's funny that we brought all of this up, and here we are moving into the SEC tournament, and we're worried about Baker-Mazara. But I tell you, for me, it's just something that you just have to address to let him know, hey, put the team first. Don't get caught up in these moments. You're very important. No one is going to feel any worse about being ejected in a big game like that, Alabama versus Auburn at home, than Chad Baker-Mazara. He's a competitor. And more so, the biggest thing about his game, he's not just some instigator, an agitator out there on the court. He's a really good player. This is a guy who can score on multiple levels. He's a great defender, and he's needed not just because he's impactful as far as getting under the skin of other players, but he's just really good. So if I'm Bruce Pearl, you have one conversation with him. You tell him enough is enough. Let's stop all of this stuff, and let's go out here and be the best that we can be, because we can't be that without you.
How do you, I mean, I don't know how you kind of deal with that. I feel like when you watch him, he's constantly the aggressor. People say he was responding to agitation from Alabama. I didn't see anything that was too egregious. Yeah. Is there going to be some pushing and shoving in a rivalry game? Of course. But I didn't think there was anything too aggressive. What do you think kind of set him off last week?
Well, I don't know if he was set off. I think it's just a little bit of him. I mean, like, he plays with an edge. You know, maybe there was just a moment where it was getting physical. Now, Chris Youngblood is a veteran player who knows how to be tough, and that could have been something where there was some jawing back and forth. But he lost his composure in the moment. Now, you got to know, when you're playing, there's always going to be a battle within the competitor that you're going at. There's going to be some cheap shots, but you have to be smart enough of when you're going to get it in, when you're going to send your message. And that's the issue that I see with Baker-Mazara, is that he loses his cool, and it's just obvious in which that the situation is going to be something that can potentially be ejected from the game. But, I mean, I don't know if he was I don't think that he was instigated by everyone else. It is just a little bit of his style that he plays with an edge.
Richard Hendricks joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. Thanks to our friends at Pizza Pulls that you can find on Fanatics Live. How did your opinion change about this Alabama team heading into the postseason? Either what they're capable of, how they should operate, what's different about how you view them now after what you saw Saturday?
Well, nothing really changes, because I think if Alabama's playing their top-level ball, I think they can win a national championship, and they can beat any team in the country. I thought it was interesting to see that Alabama was able to get the win done with a mid-range shot, something that you never see from Alabama, who lives by the three-point line and likes to drive all the way to the basket. But those baskets that you've seen Mark Sears score in recent games, these floaters, these shots that's in the mid-range, that's going to be so important moving into the NCAA tournament. The scout report on Alabama is going to be to run you off the three-point line and then bottle you up at the rim. You're going to have to be able to hit those tough shots in the mid-range to be able to win games in the NCAA tournament, in the SEC tournament, because when defenses tighten up and they take away your main thing, which is getting out in transition and not allowing those threes, then you got to be able to counter with something. But when Alabama's playing good defense, if they can do a better job of that, then they're a tough team. Grant Nelson also, his performance that he had against Auburn was huge. He will be a huge part of Alabama's success coming down. He has to get into his top level of play and get into it right now.
Yeah, what do you think happened with him this past weekend? Because it feels like he's been, I don't want to say going through the motions, because that just has such a negative connotation, but he just hasn't been an impact player at all, I feel like, in the last handful of weeks, maybe even a month. So what do you think exactly went down to kind of jumpstart his game and allowed him to kind of revert back to what we saw down the stretch last year?
Well, a few factors. I think, one, you have to give a little bit of credit to Mo Diabate. I mean, Nate Oates has been able to use his backup, who's been playing tremendously well. Mo Diabate with some really good games, not just from a hustle standpoint, but he's been productive as far as making plays with the ball and scoring in one-on-one situations. He's been a matchup problem when he can post up and use his physicality. And that throws off the rhythm sometimes of the guy who's a starter. But Grant Nelson has been able to show that he shows up in big games. And when he's able to do that, he's the X factor. He's the guy who can rim protect. He can switch multiple players on the defensive end. If he's knocking down outside shots, as he hit 3 of them on the road at Auburn, that really opens up the defense because a lot of teams don't respect him. And then that allows him to use his size and speed and length to finish at the rim with his athleticism. So he's the guy who's just going to have to play big all around for Alabama. Maybe he was banged up a little bit in recent games, but I would also credit that Alabama had some other players who really had it going in that stretch where Grant Nelson was not at his best.
Who's a more important player for Alabama in the postseason to make a deep run, Grant Nelson or Mark Sears?
I think it's Nelson. I think because he's a player that teams do not guard from the outside. They will give him that set shot from the three-point line, and if he can make that, then I think it changes the dynamic of the team. Now, Mark Sears is a guy who's at the top of the scouting report, but you're going to know that he's going to try to get his 20. That's just what it is. He's going to get fouled. He's going to try to get to the free throw line. He's going to shoot at a high clip from the outside and get his attempts up. So he has a recipe in which he tries to get his buckets, but it's the buckets that you get from the other players on the court that get you beat. It's when Chris Youngblood can go off for 10, 15 points. When Grant Nelson can give you 15 points. It's when Mo Diabate can give you 10, 15 points. That's when Alabama's dangerous. You know what you're going to get from Sears. You know what you're going to get from Holloway. And if Phylon can get it going, then they're dangerous. But Nelson is the guy.
When you watch Sears and everything and how I feel like he played as a distributor, he, I think, did a decent job of that. There were still some moments where like, ooh, don't do that. Like when he dribbled through and then brought it back out to the top and tried to throw up a fadeaway 3 that got rejected there in the second half. There's still those moments where he feels like he tries to do it kind of all himself. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to get rid of that, but how do you manage that, knowing that he's really at his best when he's allowing everyone else around him to play really well? And if he goes for 30, that's awesome. But when they've had a ton of points from Sears, it hasn't always been the best performance for the team. How do you evaluate that?
No, you're exactly right. And it's those situations with the over dribbling, over penetrating into the lane. It makes it difficult. I think he should learn from what he's seen in recent games of finding something in what the defense gives them. And what I mean by that is they play pressure defense around him on the perimeter. When he gets to the lane, they make sure to show bodies, and it's tough for him to finish over, 6'10", 6'11" guys at the rim when he's trying to finish with layups. And might not be getting the benefit of the foul call to get to the free throw line to shoot 7, 8, 9 free throws. Last game against Auburn, he only had 2 free throws. Getting to the free throw line and scoring is a huge part of his point production. Now, what he's going to have to make sure to do is slow down the pace. When you're coming off of those ball screens and you're going full speed all the way going to the basket, you slow down and get in the middle area. That's where you're going to be able to find some buckets because the teams are going to make it very hard for him to get the easy threes, the walk-up threes in transition, and he's not going to get them off of the ball screen action. So he's got to pick and choose where he can find his point production. It's going to be needed, but at the same time facilitate for others, because that's what's going to open up the team. You have to have multiple threats to be dangerous. You just can't be one-dimensional.
Richard, the SEC tournament we're going to begin Wednesday. One quick answer that I want from you, and then I want to ask you another question about the tournament in general. Is it of great benefit to play early on Friday? The reason I ask that is I know you get more rest for the next day's game, but it's also an odd time of the day to actually play a basketball game. Which would you rather have?
Yeah, I would rather play early. I would rather play early. I always felt like in tournament play, you have a sense of pressure that happens when you're playing the late games. And what happens with the late games is you already see what's in front of you, and you have a tendency to think ahead. You say, oh, man, like if Alabama has the last game on Friday night, you're going to already say, oh, we're going to be playing Florida next round. Well, no, you have to focus on if you're playing Oklahoma, Georgia, or Kentucky. And that's a challenge. You have the opening game, then you know that you're first and foremost focused on your opponent. There's nothing else that you're thinking about. Oftentimes, you don't have the environment that's in the arena yet to potentially be some type of six-man type of feel from the opponent. And you don't have the rest of the people in the venue to root against you as well. So Auburn, you take that, they're playing that early game, the noon game, on that. You don't have the benefit of having the Alabama fans, the Tennessee fans, and everybody else in there trying to root against number one. You can handle your business before they get into the building. That's how I would love to be, and you can be focused on that one opponent.
Oh, it's all great points. When you look at the draws of the teams that begin Friday, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, do you see a big difference? Do you see any difference with the difficulty of either of those teams' draws?
I think they're all going to be difficult. I do think that when you plays a role. Obviously, you want to be playing earlier so you can get more rest and you can focus on your game. Alabama potentially playing Kentucky for the third time might be the most difficult of the draws. Just because it's hard to beat a team three times. Mark Pope's team is starting to play really good basketball. They're getting healthy, and they're getting healthy at the right time of the year. So that's a matchup that I look at could be dangerous. Florida, in that their round of games, can have the advantage over Missouri if Missouri does get out of that because they did lose to them. So a psychological thing right there. Tennessee is going to be who they are. They're going to come out there and they're going to play physical against everyone. And I do think that physical brand of basketball is something that travels from round to round. It's just going to be, can they get some offensive production? But obviously Auburn, with the number one draw, you have the better seeding and your better time slot to help benefit them. But Alabama's, I think, has the toughest of all of these just because of who you could potentially be playing has that type of revenge factor.
Does it ever concern you, kind of looking at how physical this game could be? I don't know how you feel as a basketball player coming back the next day, but I look at, for instance, Tennessee's draw. If they play A&M in their first game, like that's going to be a bloodbath. So how do you, I know you get off your feet. I know you go and get probably ice baths, but what does the 24 hours between games look like in the SEC tournament after you're victorious?
I think it's better for the teams that can be able to win with finesse. I think that in a time period when we played a physical style of ball, and I always felt like it was very difficult to recover, particularly when you knew that you were going to have another physical game the next day. I mean, there was a lot of posting up. There was a lot of boxing out. I mean, you don't see that anymore. You don't see 3 and 4 guys crashing the offensive glass every single time. But if you do have that type of mentality, which you talk about Tennessee, that Texas A&M team, they're going to go to the offensive boards. So that isn't something that plays into their favor when you're playing that style. And that's something that you point out right there, that Alabama may have the advantage because you're going to have Alabama and Kentucky, which can be two finesse-type teams. Florida and Missouri can be a little bit more finesse-type teams, whereas at the top of that bracket, Auburn, if they play Ole Miss or even Arkansas, that's going to be a physical brand in that game. It's going to be a physical brand for Tennessee and Texas A&M and whoever gets out of that Texas Vandy game. The lower half of that one is a little bit more up and down finesse basketball, and the top half is going to have a much more physical tone. I would lean towards the teams that can get out and play finesse to be more healthy and more fresh into the later rounds.
Who's the most dangerous team that does not begin this tournament on Friday?
I'm going to have to say Kentucky, just because of the draw that they have. They're playing good basketball. I believe they're coming off a win in their last game, so they have some momentum. If they can get healthy, if Jackson Robinson can get back out there, you have an elite shooter. Let's see, it's Lamont Butler, I believe, the point guard. If he's starting to feel healthy, now you have a team that has really good players all the way around in every position. They run an offense that keeps you honest with that 5-out spread offense when they put Amari Williams at the top of the key and he's facilitating. But the biggest thing that you'll find out if you ever go to a SEC tournament is Big Blue Nation shows up, and they show up and they show out. And you know that in every single game that you're going to play against them, you're going to be playing against the faithful from Kentucky, because they're going to come in and they're going to take over Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. And, you're not just playing against them. It's going to be a home game anytime when they're in the SEC tournament. So you always have to consider them as very dangerous. But if they get beat, there's a lot of tickets that'll be opened up for a lot of people who want to make the trip up to Nashville for sure.
Richard Hendricks joins us every Monday. Thanks to our friends at Pizza Pulls on Fanatics Live. Great stuff today. Excited to I mean, it's a week away, but I'm excited to have you back Monday to just recap all of this basketball that we're going to get. I know this has to be your favorite time of year.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know, I'm going to be on the call in the American Conference, so I'll be out there, and I won't be able to be in Nashville, but I wish this was a time that I was. I mean, man, I've always loved SEC tournament or any postseason tournament action where you have everybody in the same venue. The pageantry is something that you must take advantage of as a family to be a part of. And this is going to be, I think, the best SEC tournament that people have seen in a long time.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about it. We'll talk some American Conference tournament when you come back with us Monday as well. So appreciate the time, Richard, and look forward to catching up with you a week from now.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Richard Hendricks joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. You deserve solutions that are built for you. So also, Richard, brought to us by Pizza Pulls each and every week. If you want to get into some of the Topps finest, the Topps Chrome football cards that are out now, maybe get into some of the Bowman draft, whatever that is, even Pokemon, WWE, Disney cards, all at fanaticslive.com. But the link that we'll tweet out, click that. You can get $25 from Pizza Pulls today if you go ahead and sign up and use that towards a break of your choice. Richard brings up some good points with this SEC tournament, and it's interesting, Greg, to hear his take on, because I kind of lightly mentioned it earlier, just how big that Kentucky crowd can be in this tournament, specifically just that one fan base, how it can just change the building when they roll in. And even if they're not on the floor, they can change it, because that place can get empty if Kentucky's expected to go deep and all of a sudden they go out early. All of a sudden, there are a lot of extra tickets floating around for other people to have.
Well, if for whatever reason they go out early, that's
that wasn't as much of a reference for this year as other years, but just
it gets awkward.
It gets empty quick,
real quick,
because they like to fill it up. Other in-state teams playing over the weekend, we need to talk about those, but more importantly, we need to talk about Bromberg's.
Bromberg's great. Been going there for a very long time. It's the only place that I've purchased jewelry from since we've moved back, and I've yet to have an experience that I would change. It's been awesome. Every time I walk in the door, I am greeted with a great sales staff, greeted by friends that I've now developed close relationships with over the course of time. Have always been grateful to the incredible service and the selection that you get when you go to Bromberg's. Highly recommend going and checking it out right now. The diamonds that they have, the jewelry that they have, the one-of-a-kind pieces that might be in your family for multiple generations. Go on over and check them out at Mountain Brook Village or at the Summit. You'll be so glad you did at Bromberg's.
All right, when we come back, we'll give you an update on some other teams from the state of Alabama, how they fared over the weekend, begin to look ahead at some different tournaments. That's next on Mac and Cube in the morning. Welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 9:22 a.m. It is Monday, March 10th on Jocks 94.5. A couple of other surprises in college basketball over the weekend locally that we need to get to. And we will roll through a couple of those here in just a moment. First, I want to tell you about your CBD store. If you're looking for help for arthritis, anxiety, your CBD store has help. They have products that can help you with that, products that your pets can get help for that also. They've had a couple pets in my household that their treats have helped get them around a little bit better when the arthritis was getting to them and they got older. Your CBD store, first company to have USDA certified organic oil supplements. They've got the stamp seal on those products. Therefore, they meet and achieve a certain set of standards and tests to be signed off on. Largest brick and mortar CBD retailer in the world. So if it's weight loss, the Trim by SunMed on the shelves now. Skincare, gut health, your CBD store can help. Go by one of their 3 locations. Highway 280 by Bailey Brothers, 150 by the Cajun Cleaver. Trustful just off 459 or now downtown in 5 Points. Your CBD store where good health hits home. All right, we did mention that tonight Troy is going to go in the Sun Belt Championship game. Troy over the weekend able to get into that Sun Belt Championship game with a win against James Madison last night. Convincing win, 79-60. Had 3 players with 20 or more points. Jackson Field had 21, 5 of 8 from behind the 3-point line. First Sun Belt Championship game, tournament championship game since 2017. Head coach Scott Cross doing a great job there for the Trojans. They knocked off Old Dominion earlier, 75-59. Only 4 of 19 from the 3, but had 4 starters in double figures to get through the Sun Belt quarterfinals. Jacksonville State goes down to Kennesaw State, 70-74 over the weekend, still at 20-11. They were out-rebounded 40-36, shot 39%, 7-24 from 3. Jerome Pierre, again, he's been great this year for the Gamecocks, 22 points, just not enough to get that win. In D3, we talked about it with Coach Kamara on Friday. Montevallo goes down to Valdosta, 81-79. Brandon Fossil had 28 points. Valdosta gets to 25-5. So they will not meet UAH in the championship game yesterday as UAH knocked off Valdosta to be able to get there 101-95, but then UAH would go down in the championship game of the Gulf South Conference yesterday. That was a pretty big surprise, actually, as UAH had been on fire this season. And nonetheless, they're going to be in the D3 tournament down in Florida. UAH going to play Tampa in the first round. That'll be on March the 15th at 5. And then Montevallo gets Florida Southern, who's 25-8 at noon. So both those teams do get into the tournament, but unfortunate that they could not win.